right now, I think I have said all I have to say about podcast guesting. There is a catalog of phenomenal episodes that you can bet your bottom dollar I am going to repurpose. But do I need to continue publishing podcast episodes week after every other week to do that? I don't think so. So I would rather end on a high note, having created content that I am super proud of, rather than scraping by to, quote, just create content. Well, hello there, pitches. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Pitched Podcast. I'm your host, Angie Trueblood, a podcast guesting and hosting expert and the founder of the Podwise Group, a concierge podcast interview booking agency. If you are an OG listener of this podcast, welcome back, friend, and thank you for your support over the years. If you are new here, it is so great to meet you. I hope you enjoy binging this library of 118 podcast episodes that we have published over the last 4.5 years. So you might have noticed from the title of the episode that this is our last episode of the podcast, which is bananas to me, but also very, very bittersweet. As I sat down to plan out the episode and map out what I wanted to share with you, I actually had a really hard time following my normal show flow, if you will. So instead, I started writing a letter, which is kind of my go-to, right? It's a pitch, if you will, as to where I would like you and I to go from here, give you a little bit of backstory about why the podcast is ending and what's coming next. So if you will indulge me one last time, I would like to read my letter to you. Dear listener, first of all, thank you. Thank you for tuning in week after every other week for the last 4.5 years. Thank you for emailing me, connecting with me in my DMs, whether that was on Facebook in the beginning, then Instagram, and now LinkedIn. And thank you for letting me know exactly how this podcast has helped you over the years. You have been the driving force in my commitment to show up for you on a very consistent basis and with content that I hoped would help you. And there are very few other things in my life that I've been this consistent with for this long. And I know it's because I had you on the other side of the mic. Thank you for sharing this show, whether it was Go Pitch Yourself or Pitched, with your friends. Thank you for tagging me. Thank you for sharing the show in groups and private messages. Thank you for helping make this podcast a success by my measures. And since you might be wondering, my measure of success for a podcast is the connection that I feel with the listeners, the feedback that I receive from guests on the impact that their episodes had on their life and their business and their network, and also the network that I have been able to curate while interviewing experts and colleagues. This show has checked all of those boxes for a very long while. So why am I pulling the plug on it if it's been such a raving success? Why now? There's a couple of reasons. So first, to produce a show that engages and grows an audience the way that Go Pitch Yourself and Pitched has takes time and takes resources. I don't take lightly the responsibility of using the time that I get in your ears wisely. And the time that it takes to prepare for shows, whether solo or guest, is not insignificant, especially when I look at the fact that my business has grown 50% in just the last year. My time and our clients need more of me. So there's the time component. Similarly, podcast guesting is obviously a priority of ours, given the business that I am in. And my guesting on other shows has always been a priority. Candidly, it has fallen to the wayside over the last 6 to 9 months. And coming into 2024, that has to change. So I need my calendar to be open to record my guest interviews. It's funny, even being in this business, I have always prioritized showing up on my podcast on a consistent schedule. And it's become clear to me that over the last year, that has taken priority to my guesting on other people's podcasts. And I always remember way back when I wanted to launch the show in 2019, and my friend Rachel Cook said, don't launch it until you are consistently guesting on other people's shows. And I need to make space for that. So, number 3, right now, I think I have said all I have to say about podcast guesting. There is a catalog of phenomenal episodes that you can bet your bottom dollar I am going to repurpose. But do I need to continue publishing podcast episodes week after every other week to do that? I don't think so. So I would rather end on a high note, having created content that I am super proud of, rather than scraping by to, quote, just create content. Now you might be thinking, okay, but Angie, isn't a podcast a lead generating tool? Sometimes. When I launched the show in 2019, it was really helpful in growing the programs that I was promoting, the Go Pitch Yourself course and eventually the Podwise Co-op. But as we have doubled down on client work and eliminated some of those educational programs, I have found that the podcast actually serves as more of a nurture tool where potential clients find us through other means, me guesting on shows and from referrals, and they use the podcast more to litmus test me and our team before scheduling a discovery call. And again, the podcast is still going to be there for that. I don't need to be continuously creating new content to help check that box. So what's the plan, Stan? Well, Pitched, the podcast, will stay right where it is. And we'll also be playing with ways to use it for content. Soon, I will be releasing a 6-ish episode public podcast that I will point new folks who discover me to. The truth is, if someone new discovers me, whether through a referral or hearing me on someone else's podcast, I would much rather point them to a 6 or 8 episode podcast of content that I have carefully curated for them, rather than throw them to the wolves of 118 episodes and hope that they figure out how to listen to the information that they need to make a decision about working with us. So this new approach and a curated podcast will allow me to control our customer's journey a bit more. And so, spoiler, keep an eye out for the release of that show when it comes. I'll actually announce it in the Pitched feed because we are going to be testing out some new ways to leverage some of the technology that's out there in the podcasting space in that show. And finally, to be very candid, I am in the business of podcast guesting. And while some of our clients come to us already hosting their show, it is not a requirement to be a podcast guest. You do not have to be a host in order to guest on someone else's show. And many clients who actually find guesting to be a very effective strategy for them never venture into the world of podcast hosting because they don't need to. Podcast guesting is an effective strategy whether or not you host your own podcasts. And I like to be walking the walk on that, right? I want people to see me out there guesting on other people's shows, not having a podcast that is continuously pumping out new content and seeing that that works. So expect us to be walking the walk of interview repurposing, just the way that we repurpose content for our clients. That's what we are going to take on as well with this new time, space, and resources space that we have available to us after we are not continuously creating new content. Okay, did that answer all of the questions? I hope so. If not, or even if it did, I really want us to stay in touch. So a couple of ways that we can do that. So first, please connect with me over on LinkedIn. I'm at Angie Trueblood on LinkedIn. Shoot me a connection request with a little note that says, I heard you on the Pitch podcast. I want to stay connected. Secondly, join our newsletter. I send out an email every other week, and it always includes some behind the scenes podcast guesting support. You can go over to the podwisegroup.com/pitches to opt in to that newsletter, and you'll actually get a copy of some of the pitches that we have sent to our clients over the years. But go pop in and do that so that we stay connected as we move forward in this podcast guesting and podcast hosting journey together. And if you are not following this show, the Pitched Podcast, make sure you go hit follow in whatever app that you are listening to it in, so that when the announcement comes for the more capsule-focused podcast, you will get notified of it and you will be able to pop over and listen to it. All right? That is all for now, my friends. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I hope more than anything that you will go out there, be well, be visible, and go get pitched. All the best to you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitched. If you would love to get pitched to be a guest on podcast, we here at the Podwise Group would love to help you. We offer 2 primary services to support our clients in landing and converting podcast interviews. Whether you want to handle the pitching yourself or you'd like our team to do it all, hop on over to our site, thepodwisegroup.com/services to check out how we can help. If one of them suits your fancy, you can schedule a time to connect with me right there. I am so looking forward to connecting with you.